5 years ago, the armies of the past defeated the cruel enemy in a battle that lasted 3 days and nights. Those of us that had survived faced big struggles to rebuild the towns and cities, as the goddamned enemy left no infrastructure standing. For many individuals, survival represented a struggle that proved insurmountable. For those who prevailed, existence reverted to fundamental principles, echoing the lives of the soldiers of the past who had fought for and defended the nation centuries previously. However, they fought back, and gradually the towns and villages were being rebuilt. For Sam, Josh, Thomas, Little Faith, and myself, life would never be the same again. We had built and lived in a large wooden bungalow in the forests of my old home county of Norfolk. Here we were able to manage an existence that saw us all fed and watered, and we cared for each other like the family we had become. Then, one rainy day, as I was preparing a meal, the sky suddenly turned red, the ground began to shudder, and strange, long-forgotten sounds started to be heard right across the nation.
Ruined towns being clear, first lights coming back on. Farmers walking out to fields where the battle smoke is gone. Children running through the streets that once were battle lines. Families finding one another after losing so much time. The whole world's holding its breath, everything's soft and not safe yet. People moving slow like they're learning how to live again, light returning in fragments, not in floods. But the light keeps breaking through, even cracked bells ring the truth. Hope is fragile, hope is thin, but it's enough to start again. We rise from ashes, shoulder to shoulder, building a world that's rough but bolder. Yeah, the colors may be torn and frayed, but we left them anyway. Survivors forming neighborhoods, veterans trying to find their place. Moments of forgiveness written in the lines on every face. A woman sweeps her doorway clean, a child pulls memories from the mud. A man props up a burned signpost, though the words are gone for good. Carpenters repairing doors, medics reopening clinics, farmers planting seeds again, still scarred by trenches. But the light keeps breaking through, even cracked bells ring the truth. Hope is fragile, hope is thin, but it's enough to start again. We rise from ashes, shoulder to shoulder, building a world that's rough but bolder. Yeah, the colors may be torn and frayed, but we lift them anyway. A single bell rings through a damaged church, a regiment's colors folded, not raised. A memorial rising from the rubble, a new generation walking through the haze. This is where Grace and Josh belong, where Sam still watches the coming dawn, while the mythic past stands silent guard, and tomorrow learns to carry on. And the light keeps breaking through, every scar a different truth. Hope is fragile, hope is thin, but it's enough to start again. We rise from ashes, hand in hand, rebuilding heart and rebuilding land. Yeah, the colors may be torn and frayed, but we lift them anyway. The bell rings once more, imperfect but alive. And the world takes one more step into the dawn. They said when the war was over, when the last gun fell still, peace came rolling in like a promise over every hill. History closed its pages, let the silence take the stage. Four souls kept a secret they could never disengage. Yeah, the world moved on believing what it needed to believe, that the past was just a shadow, something easy to leave. But in the dark between the moments, in the spaces left behind, there's a truth that's carved in stone, not erased by time. They didn't fade like whispers, didn't drift out with the smoke. No, they stepped into the silence where the ancient ground still spoke. They keep the watch in the dead of night, on the ridges burning and memories light. In the forest, the ruins where the old ghosts stand, still holding the line for their homeland. You won't see them there, but you'll feel their breath in the quiet between every life and death. When the bells ring out and the shadows crawl, the fallen ain't gone, they're watching us all. Out there on the borders, where the broken hedgerows lie, in the echoes of the battles where the brave refuse to die. Not ghosts, not spirits, not stories we tell, but a living kind of memory in the spaces we can dwell. There's a shift in the air when the old bells ring, like a second sound hiding underneath everything. And the ones who remember, yeah, they know that sign that the past ain't buried, it's just out of sight. The scholar reads the pages, sees the truth in every line. The soldier feels it deep within his bones like a warning sign. They keep the watch in the dead of night, on the ridgelines burning and memories light. In the forest, the ruins where the old ghosts stand, still holding the line for their homeland. You won't see them there, but you'll feel their breath in the quiet between every life and death. When the bells ring out and the shadows crawl, the fallen ain't gone, they're watching us all. Samuel hears it in the silence, when the world stands still. Josh feels the tremor like a cold wind on the hill. Grace sees a fire in her daughter's eyes, and the truth lives on where the old world lies. They didn't march to glory, didn't fade away. They stood beyond the veil where the lost ones stay, where memory turns to duty, and duty won't die, where the past stands guard while the years roll by. They keep the watch in the dead of night, through the storm, through the fire, through the endless fight. From the fields of old to the streets today, they're the line that will not break if the enemy when the smoke cleared, ash settling like tired snow. And in that silence, 5 figures stepped forward into the world. The darkness left behind, Grace moved first, sweeping rubble from her doorway. With hands that had forgotten softness, her voice was low, steady as a lantern flame. She carried faith on her hip, a reminder that tomorrow still had a heartbeat, still had a heartbeat. Josh walked the perimeter, boots sinking into mud, where trenches once carved the earth. He didn't speak much, he didn't need to. The scars across his arms told the story of every night he kept the darkness back. Sam watched the horizon like it might speak to him. He remembered the sound of the guns, the way the sky burned red, the names of the ones who didn't make it home. But he also saw the small things, a child laughing, a door being repaired, a cracked bell ringing once more. Thomas carried the colors folded against his chest, not raised, not yet. He knew the weight of history, the cost of every inch of ground. He built a memorial from broken stone, so the future would remember what the past had paid and faith. She didn't know the darkness, she only knew the warmth of Grace's arms, the softness of Sam's smile, the strength in Josh's shadow, the stories Thomas whispered about a world she would one day walk. Her first steps were the first steps of the dawn. They carried the light through the ruins and the dust, 5 hearts beating for the ones who were lost. Hope was fragile, but they held it tight. Grace, Sam, Josh, Thomas, and Faith, the 5 who kept the world alive.
It was raining again that night. The kind of rain that makes the world hold its breath. I was stirring the soup, listening to the wind against the shutters, when the light changed, the air thickened, and I knew something was coming. Through the storm they rode, 5 crusaders, their horses breathing smoke, their armor shining like memory itself. The priest dismounted first. He said he had come to wed us, not in joy, but in remembrance. And in that moment, I understood this was not a blessing alone. It was a warning that the armies of the past were stirring again, and that love, even now, must stand against the gathering dark.
checked the locks on the door. Sam stopped cold when the window shook like marching feet on the floor. Outside the horses were breathing smoke in the cold beneath the rain. Old Crusader crosses emerged from the dark like memories waking again. Thomas whispered they've returned as the lantern light burned thin. Four-eyed shadows stepped through the door with the storm behind their skin. But the first of them lowered his hood, rain running down his mail. A Crusader priest with a weathered face like a ghost from an older tale. Do not fear, said the tired old man, his armor scarred and worn. I've walked through 1,000 years of war to bless the love you sworn. Grace froze still, Josh's breath caught hard. Faith held her daisy tight as the priest drew out a battered book worn soft by ancient nights. He joined their hands by the trembling fire, a strip of cloth in his grasp, and whispered vows like a quiet flame holding back the coming blast. Then the bells outside began to ring, low and cracked but alive. And in that room two hearts held fast as the storm prepared to rise. And the old flags rose through fire again, through the smoke and the driving rain. We stood with the dead, we stood as one, till the dark finally turned and run. Raise the bells, let the broken sing, let the lost know what tomorrow brings. 'Cause the past came back when the world gave way, and we held the line till the break of day. This time the enemy comes, they come like an ancient storm, not peaceful, not noble, but relentless. The Romans return, mud covered. The Crusaders ride in silence as troops from both world wars march through smoke. Tanks emerge from fog, and somewhere beyond the ruined hills, the dead prepare to rise. clouds rolled from the west, and the stories Thomas carried stirred like ghosts inside his chest. Grace pulled Faith in closer, Sam felt thunder in the air. Josh saw shapes within the distance, like the past still standing there. And the wind began to gather, pulling dust across the plain, as if history itself had come walking back again. When the banners start to whisper, when the daylight starts to fade, when the echoes of the old world rise like shadows we once made, we will stand here all together, 5 hearts raced against the storm. For the past may rise to meet us, but the dawn is where we are born. No sword, no shield, no warning, just the tremble of the ground, just the breath of ancient footsteps in the mist without a sound. But Faith held up her daisy like a lantern in the gray, and the light within that flower kept the darkness held at bay. When the banners start to whisper, when the storm begins to rise, when the ghosts of all our yesterdays come walking through the skies, we will stand here all together, 5 souls holding to the morn. For the past may rise to meet us, but the dawn is where we're born.
Since the war ended, the whole country continued with life. They started rebuilding the towns, villages, and cities, reconstructing as they went, trying to restore what had been taken from them. The 5 of us had seen enough of war and death. We all decided to stay together and travel to the county of Norfolk, where Grace came from, and we built a house in the by now wild forests there. We lived in relative peace, grew our own vegetables, hunted in the now wild forests, and little Faith thrived while being schooled by Grace and Thomas. Thomas explained one evening that the armies hadn't simply gone back to the past, but that they were still here in the shadows, patrolling vigilantly. It was they who could sense things we couldn't. They were not random visitors, but more like the first line of defense. As time passed, we all saw glimpses of the armies of the past that had saved our nation, and became accustomed to the presence of the spectral legions, strange noises in the night like the sound of hoofbeats on the forest floor. Locals said the forest was haunted, but they didn't understand. It was only the 5 of us who could see them. Although it was more of a sense than an actual sighting, we thought of this as a blessing, but Thomas said these senses were actually a warning, and that each visit meant something. He explained that they appear because something old is waking, something dangerous is coming, and that the living are not ready. His words were chilling when he went on to say, "The dead are fighting a war we cannot see. To buy the living a little more time, these small battles are the quiet war." Little Faith held his hand tightly and said, "They won't hurt us, will they, Thomas?" He smiled at her, picked her up, and told her, "They are here to protect us, especially you." As Grace put Faith to bed, she heard Thomas telling Sam and Josh that the ones the dead appear to, the ones who feel the shift first, the ones who sense the cost, the ones who will eventually be called, are a warning. It began with Grace. She was the first to feel the shift in the air, the first to see shapes moving through the dawn mist, not shadows, not dreams, but soldiers from another age stepping out of the veil. They did not come to frighten her, they came because something old was waking. Josh felt it next. Boots on frost that left no prints, a line of riders watching the horizon as if waiting for an enemy only they could see. He heard no words, yet the message settled in his chest. Prepare. Sam sensed it in the ground, a tremor beneath the fields, the kind that doesn't come from weather or machines. He found a horse's track that ended abruptly as if the rider had vanished mid-stride, and on the wind the faintest smell of gunpowder from a battle no living man had witnessed. Thomas knew it for what it was. Ancestral memory stirring in his bones. The weight of men who'd fought before him, rising again to hold a line that was thinning by the hour. He saw a saber glinting with ash, though no fire had burned nearby. He felt the cost before he saw the cause. And Faith. Faith was visited in the gentlest way of all. A single rider at her window, head bowed as if offering a promise. We will hold the darkness back as long as we can, grow live, be unafraid. Across the forests and hills the quiet war raged, unseen, unspoken, but felt in every breath of wind. The dead fought in the shadows to buy the living a little more dawn. Small battles flared and faded like sparks in the night, a clash of steel heard only by the trees, a distant cry swallowed by the mist, a torn scrap of a cloak drifting across the path, and all who were visited understood the same truth, though none had spoken it aloud. When the dead rise, the living are being called not yet to fight, but to be ready. But readiness was only the beginning. The world was shifting, and the veil was thinning. The signs grew stronger as the days passed. What began as whispers in the mist became something heavier, something that pressed against the edges of the world like a storm waiting for permission to break. Animals grew restless, dogs barked at empty doorways, crows gathered on the fences at dusk, silent and watching, as if waiting for orders from a commander only they could hear. And then came the night the veil thinned. It began with a wind that carried no weather, a cold breath that moved through the trees without bending a single branch. The air shimmered, just for a heartbeat like heat rising from stone. And in that shimmer, the dead passed through. Not in full form, not in the glory Grace had seen at dawn, but as flickers, silhouettes crossing the field, sabers drawn, eyes fixed on something beyond the horizon.
Ruined towns being cleared at dawn. turned old pages back, reading names from long ago, like prayers whispered soft and low. And the world moved careful, like a wounded man learning to stand, when the thunder rolled again across the land. When the old bells rang again, and the darkness crossed the plain, we heard the sound of marching feet rising through the wind and rain. From the ashes, from the flame, from the buried years of pain. Yeah, the dead stood beside the living when the old bells rang again. Cups were trembling on the shelf. Faith held tight on her grace, like she sensed it for herself. Hoofbeats rolling through the village, stealing leather through the night. Sam reached slow toward the doorway, Josh stepped forward ready to fight. But Thomas whispered softly, tears caught in his eyes, I know those colors, God help me, they survive. Through the drifting land and smoke, beneath the fading amber sky, came crusaders scarred by centuries, riding slowly side by side. No banners high above them, no triumph in their gaze, just tired men returning from another age. When the old bells rang again, and the horsemen reached the lane, every soul inside that house felt the past breathe once again. And the fear inside the silence slowly broke beneath their names. Yeah, the dead stood beside the living when the old bells rang again. One old night knelt down slowly, chainmail shining dull and worn. Faith held out her little daisy like a promise reborn. Grace stood frozen by the firelight, Josh lowered his shaking hands. Sam watched tears fall from Thomas, like he finally understood the plan. Then the old crusader spoke, we have returned to stand once more. Do not fear the coming darkness, you will not face it alone. When the old bells rang again, hope rose up against the rain, and the broken found a reason just to keep breathing again. Through the thunder and the embers, through the scars that still remained, yeah, the dead stood beside the living when the old bells rang again. The fire burned low, the armor softly gleamed. Outside the storm kept gathering, and somewhere beyond the fields, more armies were awakening from history to answer England's call again. came slow through the Norfolk pines, mist rolled low across the ground. The house woke up to a trembling sound, like the earth remembering its name. Grace stepped out on the threshold there, breath held tight in the cold gray air. Cavalry rising through the mist, like a memory standing again. Josh felt the pull in his heartbeat, Sam felt the weight of the years. Thomas closed his map real softly, said they come to face our fears. Oh, the redcoats rode through the morning, flags torn from a long fall war, sabers shining in the half-light, horses pounding like a distant roar. And the dead came calling the living when the dark starts rising again. Yeah, the dead came calling the living on the morning the redcoats rode again. Faith pressed her face to the window glass, eyes wide as the riders passed. Mommy, why are they looking at us? Grace, the child they hear for a reason. Not to frighten, not to harm, just to summon what's left of the brave. For the world grows thin at the edges now, when the storm begins to wave. Josh felt the call in his chest now, Sam stood straighter than before. Thomas breathed deep like a soldier who has heard this knock before. Oh, the redcoats rolled through the morning, plumes wide in the rising wind, hooves drumming through the silence like a warning carried in. And the dead came calling the living when the dark starts rising again. Yeah, the dead came calling the living on the morn the redcoats rolled. Just a line of ghosts in scarlet waiting on the other side. And the mist pulled back like a curtain, and the forest opened away, and the past reached out its hand now to the men who ride today. Josh and Thomas to the land, and the dead came calling the living when the dark starts rising again. Yeah, the dead came calling the living on the morning the redcoats rode again. Some mornings the world grows thinner, truth cuts through like flame. The dead ride out of the shadows when the living must rise again.
We were promised peace, and for a while, we believed it long enough to put the uniforms away, long enough to stop checking the horizon, long enough to think our children would never know the sound of fear. Maybe that's how it always happens, not with a grand decision, not with a vote, just tired hearts choosing hope over vigilance, choosing to heal instead of prepare, choosing to live. They gave everything once, and when the world finally went quiet, they let themselves believe it would stay that way. I can't blame them, I love them for it. But peace is a fragile thing, and now the storm is coming back for them, for all of us, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to watch them go again. God help me. I don't know if I'm strong enough to lose them twice. Thomas spoke quietly into the night. You want to know how a nation ends up defenseless? It forgets, not all at once, just slowly, softly, like a candle burning down without anyone noticing. First came the peace, a long one, long enough for people to believe the world had changed, long enough for them to think the darkness had finally died. But darkness doesn't die. It waits, it watches, it learns your quiet places. We didn't lose the army, we bled it dry. War took the strongest, peace took the rest, and hope finished the job. And now here we are, 3 men with old scars and borrowed courage, standing where 1,000 should be. I don't blame anyone. People wanted to believe in a gentler world. They wanted to believe the past was buried. But the past never stays buried, it claws its way back. And when it does, it comes looking for the ones who remember. And I remember, God help me. I remember everything. Faith sat on the doorstep with her knees pulled to her chest. She didn't understand the word enemy. She didn't understand why the sky felt heavy. She didn't understand why grown-ups whispered when they thought she wasn't listening. But she understood this. Josh's smile was different today. Sam kept kneeling down to her level. Thomas looked at her like he was memorizing her face. She tugged at my sleeve and spoke softly. Mommy, why are they packing again? Just in case, sweetheart. Faith frowned. In case was grown-up language. It meant something bad might happen. She watched Josh tighten the straps on his rucksack. She remembered when he carried her on his shoulders. She remembered his laugh. She remembered the way he lifted her up to touch the low branches of the apple tree. Now he wouldn't look at her for more than a second. She whispered to herself, why does everyone look like they're saying goodbye even when they're not saying it? She didn't know what war was, but she knew what leaving was. She knew what fear felt like in the air. She knew what silence meant when adults stopped talking. She wrapped her arms around Sam's leg and said, don't go. Sam froze for a moment. He wasn't a soldier, or a survivor, or a man carrying ghosts. He was just someone who couldn't bear to break a child's heart. He crouched and held her close. I'll come back, he said. I promise. Faith didn't know that promises made before storms are the hardest ones to keep. She only knew she had heard that sentence before in stories and memories, in the way my voice cracked when I talked about the past, and she wondered, in the small, frightened way children do, what if this time they don't? I remember the sky going dark again. Mom held me tight, and I could hear her heart. It was scared, but it didn't run. I saw shapes on the hills like the stories Dad told. Not people, not ghosts, just helpers. The bad ones came back, but the helpers stood up. They didn't shout, they didn't roar, they just stood, and the bells rang, and the dark went away. When the sun came back, I saw them walking home. I called their names, and they smiled. That's when I knew the world was safe again.
Grace woke early in the morning, her heart beating like an old snare drum. Josh looked at her and through a smile he saw the pain in her eyes and felt the fear in Faith's young soul. Sam packed his rucksack as Thomas spoke his lines. Legio 9 Hispana, gone from history but not forgotten. Faith cried, please don't go, and Grace held each one close as the cold wind pressed against the door. We'll come back, Josh said softly, though the wind tried to steal the words we always do. And Grace believed him, even as the storm gathered on the hills. 3 silhouettes walking into the dark, hearing every name carved into the land. Oh, Grace believed him, even when the night was closing in. The sky was still were black with the last of the night, the kind of dark that remembers every loss. Their boots were wet with dew and dust, the road ahead whispering a battle's not yet buried. Josh brushed a strand of hair from Grace's face, his thumb trembling though he tried to hide it. Sam knelt to Faith, her tiny hands gripping his sleeve like she could hold back the dawn. Thomas stood in the doorway, lantern burning thin behind him, looking younger like the boy he once was, before the world taught him to carry its weight. We'll come back, Josh said softly, we always do. And Grace believed him, even as the storm gathered on the hills. Three silhouettes walking into the dark, carrying every name carved into the land. Oh, Grace believed him, even when the night was closing in. The night roared like a wounded sky, the earth shook with the memory of steel. Artillery roared and rockets flew through the dawn, machine guns rattled through the dawn, jets and Spitfires tearing through the clouds, Roman shields locked beside broken tanks, Crusader banners whipped through smoke and rain, redcoats marching through drifting ash, Highland pipes crying above the slain. The enemy came with fire in their eyes, from the ruins the old armies rose, silent as judgment carved in stone. And Grace believed him, even as the bells rang across the hills. Every ghost of Britain standing tall, every fallen soul answering the call. Oh, Grace believed him, and the dawn came breaking through the storm. When the thunder finally broke and the long night lost its flame, Grace stepped out into the quiet field, with Faith asleep against her shoulder. And far down the road, three figures walked toward the morning, tired, scarred by silence, but alive. Faith woke first, her voice a bell, calling their names into the clearing light. Thomas smiled, Josh lifted a hand, Sam let out a breath he'd held for years. The storm was over, the story was home.
When the storm finally broke, the world felt different. The hills were quiet again, the fields washed clean by rain. And far down the road, I saw them walking back to us. Tired, scarred, but alive. I held Faith a little tighter, and in that moment I knew the land had found its peace again. The story was home.